Well, good afternoon to those of you who are joining us today. My name is James Lindberg, pastor of Living Grace. And again, welcome to those of you who are joining us live. I see a couple of folks have checked in already. Hopefully my microphone is working. If there's any issues with the audio, please let me know. Go ahead and put something in the comment section. Good afternoon, Karen. Welcome. Good to see you here. Thanks for spending part of your lunch break here or your lunchtime here on our live stream. And Laura also saying hello. Hello and happy Wednesday. Yes, we made it to Wednesday. We did. Good, you can hear me fine. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Yes, we made it to the middle of the week, and now it's all downhill from here until we hit the weekend. So good to see you both. Thank you for checking in. If you're watching and you feel comfortable, please take a moment to check in like Laura and Karen did. That's really our goal here. It's not just to have some sort of recording that I do and broadcast out into the world. This is meant to be a live stream for us to have a conversation, for us to look at a scripture passage and to talk about it and to give our comments about it. Just to let you know, there is a delay of about 15 seconds, 20 seconds. So if I'm going through something and you type something in and it takes me a little while to see it, just realize there's a delay from when it leaves the Living Grace World Headquarters, from when my words leave the Living Grace World Headquarters and when they go off out into the internet, and then when they actually be the other way around. When the bits and bytes leave your home or leave your device, it takes about 20 seconds, 15, 20 seconds for those words to get here to me at the Living Grace World Headquarters, which is my office here in the top level of my house. So there might be a little bit of a delay, but I'm so thankful that you're here. And again, thank you to Laura and Karen for checking in. And again, if anybody else out there wants to check in, please do so. My name is James Lindberg. I'm pastor of Living Grace, and we're here for about a half an hour. We go till about 12:30, and then after that, I'm usually hungry by that time, and so I want to go eat my own lunch. But we gather for about a half an hour, and we're taking a look at the book of Philippians right now. And last week, I think we got through, 11 verses, I think. And we're just reading through the book of Philippians. I haven't done a whole lot of preparation. This is not kind of a traditional me giving a bunch of information kind of Bible study. It's meant to be more reading passages and hearing those passages. I do have a few notes that I've jotted down, but just really to read scripture. And then if you have some comments, or if you have some ideas, or if you have some things that catch your attention, then please put that in the comment section, and then we can share that with everybody here. So that's really what it is. Not a traditional Bible study, but more of a scripture reading, scripture reflection. I actually saw another YouTuber do this. He was traveling around India. I'm not traveling in India, obviously. And he was going to some temples in India and then reading passages from, I believe is the Bhagavad Gita, from different temples or different places within India. And I thought, well, why don't we try that? Obviously, we're not visiting any temples in India right now. I'm, got the black background behind me. It's not very, it's not, the background is, it's not very fancy by any means, but if he can do it, then maybe we can do it, but using our own sacred scriptures. And the goal of this is there's not really a whole lot of schedule. I will schedule these out about a week in advance. There will be a couple of weeks over the summer where I'm going to be gone or things are going on, so we won't have them. But I'll just, as soon as I know, I'll put them out on our events page at our Living Grace Facebook page, and then we'll do them on Wednesdays at noon, and we'll try to get most of the weeks here in the summer, depending on my vacation schedule and other things that are happening. But at least for now, I think we've got another one scheduled. I'm going to schedule another one for next week. And again, and for you, you don't have to, have gone to the first one and then keep on going to them to get the, to kind of get what's going on. You can drop in whenever you like. You can, in fact, even drop in the middle of the stream. You don't really have to have a whole lot of background to what we've talked about before. It's meant for someone just to drop in, perhaps say hello, drop in, spend about 10 or 15 minutes just just listening to scripture, maybe giving their thoughts and reflections, and maybe you got to leave for a meeting. Please do. Don't feel you have to stay for the entire time, and don't feel you have to make everyone but we love it when you're able to be here. So once again, if you have not had a chance to check in like Karen and Laura have done already, then please do so. Well, just to give you a little bit of an update about what we talked about last week, we're again looking at the book of Philippians. And the book of Philippians is written, this is the only slide I have with background information. I've really tried to keep it rather simple when it comes to, the content or the information about this. But the book of Philippians is actually a letter in the Bible. It's written somewhere between 61 and 63 AD, about 30 years perhaps after Jesus died, approximately. And it was written perhaps a dozen years after the Apostle Paul started a church in the city of Philippi. And most of those churches, all those early churches that he started didn't have buildings or anything like that, traditional church buildings that we would that we might know. Most of these groups met in people's homes, and they met in someone who was most likely wealthy, who had a larger home that could fit everybody, and that's where all the Christians met. Usually were in people's homes. So when we think about him writing to the church in the city of Philippi, it wasn't like he was writing to a group of people that were meeting in a specific building called a church with a cross out front, and it's not exactly what it was. It was more kind of like a home group or a small group. And where is Paul writing from? We know who he's writing to. Where's he writing from? Well, scholars think he's in Rome and think he's in prison. And why is he in prison? Well, he's actually facing the possibility of execution for crimes against the Roman government. He was accused of being in a way kind of one who's trying to overthrow the government, kind of a terrorist, kind of a revolutionary, I think is a good word to use. And he was accused of that, and he said, you know what? I'm a Roman citizen. I want to appeal to the emperor, and I want to bring my case before the emperor. So that's why he's taken to Rome. And he's facing the possibility of execution for his crimes, but he wants to get his chance to have his case heard before the emperor. The Philippian Christians, while Paul is in prison, the Philippian Christians are supporting Paul financially. And back then, it wasn't up to the government to provide people with what they needed when they were in prison. You had to have people help you. And the Philippians are supporting Paul financially and with what he needs while he's in prison. So he's very thankful for them and for what they're doing for him. In fact, joy and thankfulness are the main themes in this letter. Last week, I believe we saw the word joy. Just in the first 11 verses, I believe the word joy was used twice in just those 11 verses. And we're going to see this come up again, this idea of joy. And in the first part of the letter, in the introduction to his letter, Paul really shares about how much he loves and how much he cares for the Philippians. You can see and you can feel just the love he has for them, the care that he has for them, the special place that the Philippians have in his heart as he begins that letter. And it just, those words just kind of are all over those first 11 verses of Philippians chapter 1. So what part of the world are we talking about? This is the only map I have as well. You can see Philippi right there, kind of in the top center, would be in the area we know as modern-day Greece. Paul entered that area through Galatia, modern-day Turkey, and crossed over there, crossed the water there, and went over to Philippi. And then when he started the church, and then later on, you see I have Rome circled there as well. And Rome would be where Paul is writing from. So Paul writing from Rome to Philippi, we would know in modern day Greece. So that's where Paul is writing from, and that's who he's writing to. So let's take a look at verse 12. Again, something comes up, then go ahead and mention that in the comment section. And if it takes me a little while, I might have to backtrack a little bit, but if it takes me a while to get to your comment, or a few moments to get to your comment, just realize it's because there's a delay. All right, beginning of verse 12. And I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, Paul says, that everything, I'm going to move this actually up here a little bit because it's kind of, well, I'll do that. Well, I won't be able to do that this time. So some of the words are going to be chopped off by my box there on the bottom. So just know that I'll read that, and you probably should be able to make out the words even though my head is in the way of some of them. Paul says, and I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, so he's talking to the Philippians, he's writing a letter to the Philippian believers, calling them dear brothers and sisters, and I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. So what is he talking about? Everything that's happened to me here. His arrest, his upcoming trial, his being imprisoned, all those things that we would think as negative things, all those even negative things have helped Paul to spread the good news, to spread the message about Jesus. So when he's talking about here, where is here for him? It's in Rome. It's in the city of Rome, and he is again imprisoned in the city of Rome. So I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, the Philippians that he loves, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. So it looks like from this passage that Paul has guards, people that are watching over him, people that are making sure he doesn't escape. And it could be that he might have been imprisoned, not necessarily in a prison cell like we would think of, but maybe he was imprisoned in a house, and maybe he was chained to a guard. But we also know that he was able to receive visitors. People would bring him food and other things that he needed. He'd be able to write letters and then send those letters out to the different churches. So, when we think of prison, we think of people locked up in kind of a high security facility with bars. And of course, they did have places like that in the ancient world. But it may be that Paul is in a different situation. But we know that he is in prison. He is not free to go as he chooses, and he is now being watched over by guards, and maybe is in chains. Maybe it's literally in chains, or maybe it's figuratively, that he's in chains, or he's in bondage, or he's in prison. But it seems like some people might be discouraged about being in prison. And of course they should. Back in the ancient world, prison is no joke. I've never been to prison. I've seen enough documentaries about prisons to know that it would not be very fun to be in a prison. And Paul, back in the ancient world, the prisons were also not good places to be as well. But it's interesting how Paul looks at his situation as being in prison and saying, even me being arrested, even me being, chained to a guard is still helping to spread the good news, is still helping to spread the gospel. And now he's even preaching to the palace guards. I wonder if Paul's one of those people where, he just won't stop talking. And so he continues to talk to the guards, and the guards day in and day out because they're close to Paul, in close proximity to Paul, or chained even to Paul, physically chained to Paul, that he's talking to them, and maybe he's, converting them, or maybe some of them have converted to Christianity. But everyone knows he's in chains because of Christ. He's not in chains because he's, revolutionary or a terrorist. He's in chains because of his faith. And that's what he wants people to know. Let's take a look at verse 14. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak of God's message without fear. Well, that's amazing. You would think that if Paul is in prison, maybe even for, trying to spread ideas that were not in line with what the Roman government wanted. Maybe if Paul was being accused of starting this cult, this Christian cult, you would think that people connected with Paul and other believers would say, no, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to get arrested. I'm not going to go through what Paul is going through. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, not talk about Christ to anybody. And Paul says something that the opposite is happening. Most of the believers here, there in Rome, have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. They're putting their lives out on the line. In that culture, imagine that. Nowadays here in America, when you share your faith, people might nod and they might smile, and maybe some people might not want to hear about it. But generally, you probably might even find some people who might share your faith. But boy, back in that time, it was very different. There weren't Christians all around you. You didn't know a whole lot of Christians, perhaps, in your day-to-day lives. In your day-to-day life. And so they are bold. They're gaining confidence because of Paul's imprisonment when you think they might have become scared. Would the Romans at that time been Jews or Gentiles or something else? Yeah, that's a good question. So the Romans at that time, the Romans there in Italy would have been Roman Gentiles. A Gentile really means non-Jew. So you have Romans, from Rome and in other areas who were non-Jews who would be considered Gentiles. But there were people like Paul who were who were citizens of the Roman Empire who were Jews. So you did have some Jewish people who were Roman citizens, but you also had, I think, a majority of the Roman citizens in that time from all different parts of the empire who were Gentiles, who were non-Jews. So and that was kind of what was going on. Is now Christianity Paul is starting to break out of the Jewish, going to Jewish people, and Christianity really being kind of a sect or a group of Judaism, and really trying to make it appealing to people who are non-Jews. Make it appealing to people who are from other parts of the Roman Empire, who maybe don't even know anything about the Jewish faith, or maybe they know about the Jewish faith, but they aren't part of the Jewish faith. So yeah, so there were Romans. Most Romans, I believe, were Gentiles or non-Jews, but you did have some people like Paul who were Jews, but who were also Romans, who had gained Roman citizenship, who were born into Roman citizenship. And this is one of the reasons why Paul is in Rome, why he just wasn't executed, because he's got that Roman citizenship. Would Paul have then been called a Christian then, or just a Jew still? That is a very good question. In fact, that's an issue that is even debated today. So when you talk with people who are Jewish, and this is kind of where I land, if you are Jewish, but then you convert to Christianity, then essentially you become a Christian. And there are Jews who would say that you cannot be a Jewish person. You can't be a Jew and a Christian, because once you convert to Christianity, you become a Christian. But there are other people who would still consider themselves Jews, and but they would also say that they are Christians, but they're still Jews as well. And some people recognize them as being Jews and being Christians, but other people who are Jews would say, no, they're not Jews anymore. They're not Jewish anymore. They've kind of renounced that, and now they're Christian. And then you get into the issues of ethnicity, and so there's that question that you asked. Oh, that is still a live issue even today, but it's a good question. You're deep thinking today. So yeah, if you know someone who's Jewish, and you say, oh, you know what? I know someone who's a Christian, but they still count themselves as being a Jew. Though for some people, some Jews could take offense at that type of language. So Paul, I think, he talks. There's Paul, I think at that time, I think he probably would consider himself a Jewish person. I mean, he talks about, his Jewish credentials and how much of a zealous Jew that he was, and, him knowing the Jewish scriptures and him following the Jewish laws. So I think he would still maybe consider himself Jewish, but he would probably consider himself as a Jewish person who is now following Jesus the Messiah. But nowadays, that is really a debate, and some Jewish people would take offense at someone saying they're a Jew and also a Christian. So there's a whole lot of deep stuff going on there. But Paul does talk about his Jewish identity. He also talks about being a Roman citizen as well. So that's really where for Paul, a person who is Jewish, who identifies himself as a follower of Christ, but who is also a Roman citizen. I definitely could see that see that. Let me put that comment up here. Let me do that. Yeah, Karen said, I definitely could see that. I'm not sure how you could be Jewish and a Christian at the same time after taking your religion class. Yeah, and I tend to, and again, some people might take, might take me to task for this, or might not agree with this, but I'm like you. If a person is Jewish and then they convert to Christianity, I think in a certain sense you've left Judaism and you've become Christian. And I mean, it gets into the whole thing with, what about people who are ethnically Jews? And I'm not qualified to speak about Judaism and ethnicity and all that, but I'm of the opinion, I think, that if you convert to Christianity, then you are, in a certain sense, putting your Jewish faith behind you, or removing yourself from the Jewish faith, and you're becoming Christian. So that's again how I would look at it. I would agree with you. I think it would be difficult to be Jewish and Christian at the same time. But again, some of that is from people I've seen on social media who are Jewish and their Jewish faith, and for them, for someone to call themselves Jewish and Christian is offensive to them, and so I want to kind of recognize that I want to recognize that as well. Well, yeah, that's a great question about Judaism and Christianity, and Paul being Jewish, but now sharing about the good news about Jesus Christ, but also being a Roman citizen, and also sharing this message to people who are non-Jews and who are Gentiles. I mean, under the Jewish dietary laws, or under some of the Jewish laws back then, if you were a strict Jew, you really wouldn't have much interaction with Gentiles. You were not supposed to. You're supposed to have limited interaction with Gentiles. So Paul's even blowing that out of the water. He's having regular interaction with Gentiles, which is something that really conservative, practicing Jews would not do in the land of Israel. So good question, and I wish there was an easy answer to it. So Paul talks about this idea of the people in Rome who are Christians, who are gaining confidence and not shying away from sharing about their faith. Now here's where it gets interesting, because you think that Christianity is probably 30 years old. The Christian movement is probably about 30 years old. How many Christians could be out there? And this next passage shows us how, really in a certain sense, how large Christianity has grown in a short amount of time. Paul says it's true that some are preaching out of jealousy and rivalry, but others preach about Christ with pure motives. So Paul says that there are actually other people. He's not the only one that's preaching about Christ, that there are other people now that are out there preaching about Jesus. I always think of Paul being kind of one of the only preachers out there, and just he's out on his own and no one else is talking about Jesus. But it seems like there are other people who are preaching as well, and those people who are preaching are not doing it, in the spirit of Paul or doing it because they like Paul. They're preaching out of jealousy for Paul. They're preaching out of rivalry for Paul. But there are other people out there that are preaching about Christ, he says, with pure motives. And we don't know exactly the identity of those people who are preaching Christ, who are doing it out of jealousy and rivalry. But it seems like they're clearly kind of in this antagonistic relationship to Paul. They're kind of butting heads with Paul. Okay? And Paul really mentions that. It's the people who were personally at odds with Paul. You would think that, let me add that to the broadcast. You would think that some other disciples might have gone on to spread the word of Christ too. Yeah, exactly. So you have Paul going out and sharing the good news. You have other people like Peter who are traveling to share the good news. There's even some talk about one of the apostles that went to India, the disciple Thomas. There's some talk that maybe he went to India and shared the good news in India. But as you look at I don't have a picture up here, but if you look at the Roman Empire, Italy and modern day Greece and modern day Turkey and Palestine and Israel and Egypt and North Africa, that whole area, even going into going west and going into France and up into what we know as England today, all that area, covered by the Roman Empire. And if you're a Roman citizen, you're able to travel freely throughout the empire. It's not, you just say, I'm a Roman citizen, and you could go anywhere. It's not like there were a bunch of borders that you had to show your passport. You were a Roman citizen, you could travel freely. So yeah, I imagine of those, 11 disciples, they got out there on the road. And some people moved from place to place and were going on to share the word. Yeah. So the other disciples did as well. In fact, Paul kind of at times got in kind of some conflicts with some of the other disciples. Paul was a second generation disciple. He didn't actually, Paul didn't actually physically see Jesus. He saw Jesus in a vision, after Jesus had died. But Paul was one of those people. In fact, he was kind of a second generation a second generation follower, a second generation apostle when he goes and shares the good news. And, that probably could have caused maybe some tension with the other disciples who were eyewitnesses to Jesus, who walked with him and talked with him and ate with him. So Paul is kind of that next generation. But yeah, you find in the early Christian movement, they butt heads about stuff. And there's conflicts and there's disagreements over what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be a Jewish person who's now following Jesus? What dietary laws do we follow? Should we allow the Gentiles to be in Christianity? Do Gentile men need to be circumcised if they are going to be, if they're going to be Christians? I mean, if a Gentile man is going to convert to Judaism, that man would need to be circumcised. Does a Gentile converting to Christianity, which has been mostly made up of Jewish people to this point, does that person need to be circumcised? So you have different people with different agendas and different ideas about how even to be a Christian. And so some of these people are probably out preaching Christ as well as Paul is, but they got a different take on it. And maybe some of them are really trying to get at Paul. Paul's in prison. We're gonna preach our version of Christianity, and Paul's in prison, and this is my time to really, gain my own followers. So you're again seeing, even early on, 30 years after Jesus' death, these rivalries starting to form. Funny that some things are still happening. Yeah, exactly. Karen, funny that some days we are still having those same debates today in 2022. Yeah, I mean, for 2000, we often think of, Christianity being, in the early days being this one big kind of unified movement. Of course, there was some unity, but gosh, yeah, even in the first 20, 30 years of Christianity, they were having debates and they were having, disagreements and stuff about the future. And Paul even having disagreements with other people who were traveling companions of his, and people having debates with those traveling companions and separating, parting ways from people. You go on and do your thing. We're going to go do our thing. So yeah, we are still having these debates within Christianity, 2000 years later, 1970 years later or whatever. We're still, having debates within Christianity about how to follow Christ and what that means. Could be that, some of these people that are preaching out of jealousy and preaching out of rivalry, maybe they don't think Paul is really qualified. Maybe Paul talks about having poor speaking abilities, and maybe they probably thought to themselves, this guy Paul can't even talk very well. We need to get out there, and I'm a better speaker than he is, so I should get out there and start some churches perhaps. Or maybe they saw that Paul was constantly, getting in trouble, that Paul was not a very strong person. Paul talks about his weaknesses. Paul talks about, a thorn in his flesh, something that's kind of hampering him, talks about his health perhaps. So maybe they're saying this Paul is not a very strong preacher. He's not a very strong guy. Maybe we ought to preach and, try to gain his followers or his converts. Yeah, Kelly says, unfortunately, human nature creates this. We can't seem to get around it. Sometimes others think they know better. Well, that is true. Sometimes others think they know better than we do. That is for sure. Yeah. And welcome, Kelly. Good. Thanks for the comment. Good to see you here. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at this last part here. Yeah, you know what? I think we'll stop there. Let's take a look at these past few verses. It's getting to be 12:30, but let's look at these verses because Paul is really talking about those people that are preaching in opposition to him. Why do they preach in opposition to him? Verse 16, they preach because it says, he talks about others preach about Christ with pure motives. So there's those who are preaching out of jealousy and rivalry, those who are preaching about Christ with pure motives. So he talks about those who are preaching about Christ with pure motives. Okay? They preach because they love me, for they know I've been appointed to defend the good news. Okay? So again, we'll dig into this more next time about those people who are, the other people that are preaching. But it seems like there are those people that are preaching, so Paul is preaching, Paul's in prison, and other people are preaching, the same things that, similar messages that Paul is preaching, but Paul says they're doing it out of rivalry, jealous ambition. But Paul also says that there's people that are preaching because they love Paul. and that those people are defending the good news. So you have people, and I think, when you think about Paul, I mean, he started a lot of churches. He went to a lot of different cities and he started churches, and some of those churches took off and survived. Those places, the church still survives in those places to this day. Other places, the church maybe didn't take hold, but even at this time, early on, you have Paul preaching and other people preaching, and some people preaching in opposition to Paul, and some people preaching, on behalf of Paul and preaching out of love for Paul. They want to share the same message that Paul has. So in a way, it's kind of like the Wild West out there when it comes to Christianity. And all this, people out there preaching Christ, and all this while under the watchful eye of the Roman government, who wants to make sure that this group of Christians that are starting to form, aren't trying to, subvert the government. They aren't trying to overthrow the government. It isn't some wacky cult out there, that's trying to take over the government. And also under the watchful eye of those who are Jews, who are looking at this Christian movement. Who are these Jesus people? This Jesus guy thought it was this Jesus guy, the Messiah. And now we have these people who are Jewish and now converting to Christianity, and even under the watchful eyes of the Jewish leaders as well. So there's a lot of scrutiny, Christianity here, 60 AD, 65 AD. And we see Paul in prison, in chains, in a situation that he probably could get discouraged, but he's saying, you know what? I'm not going to get discouraged, because everything that's happened to me right now, being in prison, everything that's happening to me right now is helping to further the good news about Jesus. And yeah, you got the haters out there, and as Kelly said, and also Karen said, there's always seems like there's been debates in the church for 2,000 years, and Kelly says, can't seem to get around it. Sometimes, others think they know better. That is very true. And there were other people who thought when it came to the Christian faith, they knew better than Paul, and they wanted to capitalize him on being in prison. So that's what I find interesting, this about within Christianity. It is not one big tent at this point. A lot of different factions, a lot of different views about how to follow Christ. So next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about these folks who are preaching for Paul, preaching on behalf of Paul, and those people who are preaching against Paul and what Paul talks about. But yeah, Karen says, let's put that up on the screen. Karen says, I love Paul's positive attitude. Yeah, I mean, for someone who is, in prison in Rome right now, he could get really discouraged, but he does not. He has this positive attitude. And I mean, I know we're getting over time here, but even to be able to say that, I mean, usually if people don't like me, or if people, maybe are against me, or if I think people are, it kind of bums me out. It kind of bothers me. But Paul seems to kind of thrive on this. Maybe other people do as well. But Paul seems to thrive on this idea that, the message is getting out. Even though there's some that are preaching against me, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to keep on doing my thing. And I'm going to thank God for those who are preaching the message, and share with me in the good news. So, yeah, but you're right, Karen. I love Paul's positive attitude, and I certainly do as well. Well, I think we're going to stop it there for this time. And next time, like I said, Paul will talk a little bit more about these people who are preaching, and then he's going to talk about how he feels about that, and we're going to even see this positive attitude of his come out even more. And then after that, we're going to talk about a concept called being citizens of heaven. And Paul's got this really neat image of what it means to be a citizen of heaven, and talking about living and dying as well. So it gets really kind of heavy next time. So thank you for joining today for our lunchtime Bible discussion. And thank you for all the comments too. And good, Karen says, thanks for doing this. Love to pick me up midweek. I'm glad you do. Yeah, and again, just drop in whenever you're able to. I know it's summer, things are busy. I know Karen has said hello, and Kelly has said hello, and I think Laura checked in earlier as well. Just pop in whenever you're able to. And Kelly, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. And yeah, and just kind of drop in whenever you have a chance. We'll be back Sunday, 10 a.m. for Pentecost Sunday. And I think I'm going to schedule another one now when I'm done with my lunch. And we'll be back here next Wednesday at noon for about another half an hour Bible study and discussion. So God bless. Thanks to all of you who said hello. On our way to football camps. Yeah, I'll be checking in from football stadiums this weekend and next weekend. Oh yeah, it has begun. The summer travel football camp season. I hear you. So yeah, safe travels to you and your family as you're out on the road. And thank you for for checking in. If you're able to check in, please tell us what place you're checking in from. What exotic locale you're checking in from. Laura, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. And like I said, if people are checking in and they're not able to comment, that's okay. If you just listen, or you can send me a message later on Facebook if you have a question. But again, thank you for being here and for flying along with us today. So that's what we got. We'll see you Sunday, 10 a.m. Goodbye, and God's peace be with you. And thank you to all of you for checking in. And it's so good to have you a part of the discussion here today. God bless. See you next time.